Okay, in the previous lesson, we learned that how the modes in SPTree are usable using generators, nodes, and freehand to create trees. And that was like looking at the tools that SPTree gives us to be able to model the trees. And we learned that we create the trees procedurally using generators, fine-tune using nodes, and then ultimate artistic touches using this freehand mode, and got a little bit familiar with these tools and how they are possible to use. So in this lesson, we're going to dedicate to generators only and this generator panel to see actually which type of generators we have to create a tree or any kind of foliage you can imagine. And without knowing the actual tools and what they are and how they do, you cannot really maximize your tree creation inside a SPTree. So let's go for generators. So up until now, we know that the generators are something that create the geometry for the mesh inside a SPTree. And every generator can create one or multiple nodes. For example, just like the branch example that we explored in the previous lesson. So to manage the generators in here, we refer to this generation panel or generation editor, whatever you want to call it. And then there's this property bar in here. If you select a specific generator, all of its properties are here to fine tune the look of the tree that you're creating. So this is a new scene that I created to explore the different generators. And to add the generators, you can either use this menu to add generators, or in this menu using this add. These are two identical buttons. They are similar to each other. And these are the default ones, which are the trunk, branch, and whatever you see here. And then in here, there are some presets. For example, if I add a default trunk in here, you see, this is the look of the default trunk. And if I go and add another trunk, and I want that trunk to be a separate generator, not something that is attached to this one, so that I can manipulate it separately. I click on this tree, which is the default generator and the bone of what we are creating in a SPTree. I add another trunk, and you see both of the trunk are similar to each other without any proper differences. They are exactly the same. And whenever you add a trunk, you are going to get this one because this is the default trunk that SPTree provides, and there are a lot of options in here to manipulate that trunk. But whenever you spawn a default trunk, you're going to get this. So let me delete this, and there are some presets in here. These are the default ones, and these are some presets that allow you to start with something newer. For example, in this trunk menu, I decide to add an old trunk. If you add it, you see there are a lot of more displacements in here, which makes it more beautiful to look at. And this is another way of adding generators in. You can also use the default one or these presets that they have. And if you want to add a trunk that is not manipulated in any way, you can add a tube. And let me delete this one to be able to see that better. And this is the default tube. That is the starting point for all of the trunks in a SPTree. And then you can take that and go through all of the properties and make whatever you want. So there are the default ones in here, which are the most important of them are the trunk, branches, and the leaves. And also in here, there are trunk, branch, and leaf variations, which you can choose and start from instead of going for these default ones. And then alongside these default ones and these preset ones, there are decorators, which are the way to add custom details into the tree. For example, adding a nut, adding cavity or shell or anything. And these are awesome for adding those details that are not possible to generate procedurally to make the tree even look more beautiful. And to see these decorators in action, let's go to here, which we have a proper material to look at. So I'm going to add my nut on this tree itself, on the trunk, on the first level trunk in here. So selecting this generator, I go add decorators, and let's add a nut. So let's see where it has placed the knot for us. Yeah, it's in here. So it has created something in the tree for us. And to make it look even more beautiful, we're going to set a specific material to this. And thanks to this preset, it has the knot material already set for us. This is an awesome preset which has the knot material itself. So let's take the knot material using this hand icon and drag it into here. So you see it has added a custom small detail in here, which is amazing to look at. Of course, this is not the only way, and you can really fine tune the material, the look of the mesh, and anything that you have. So to make this white part also go away, you can also go select the generator, and in the properties go for material, and you see that there are a couple of materials in here, which is inner and curve. So let's take this one and bring it in here, wait for the calculations, and now you see another material has been added into here. Of course, you can add custom materials or do whatever you want to do. So this is the way to use the decorators in a SpeedTree. Of course, we will go more in depth into these later on. And the third type of generators are the photogrammetry and the custom meshes that we add into the SpeedTree. And this really allows us to use power of other 3D applications such as Blender, Max, or Maya, or even taking photogrammetry and 3D scanned meshes and put them into a SpeedTree and expand on them to create ultra realistic mesh trees. But since we are going to dedicate some lessons to photogrammetry itself, and it's a little bit more advanced than this basic things that we are going to do, we're going to let it for another lesson. So the first generator that is always there and you cannot do anything to it is the tree generator. And it holds some global parameters to the tree, and it's the default into every scene. Even if you go to File, New, and create a blank scene, the tree generator is there. And it cannot be neither added or removed or anything. It's there and it holds some parameters. And it's the root of everything that we're going to be creating in a SpeedTree. And if you want everything to be shown as a final result, you want that to be connected to this tree. For example, if I add a trunk, a basic trunk, you see it's been displaced here because it has a connection to the tree. But if I select this connection part in here and holding down backspace, you see the connection is broken apart and the tree is not being rendered now. So to make the tree render as a final result, you want to select it and bring it on top of this tree generator so that it gets calculated in the renderings. And it has quite few options. You see, if I select this, you see the only option in here which we have is the size scaler. And it's going to be a scaler to everything that we have on this tree. For example, if I select this and make the scale 1.5, for example, and hit OK, you see the tree has now been scaled. Of course, it only scales the geometry, not the forces or anything into the scene. It only scales the tree, the object, the geometry. So let's go back to the same tree that we were. And the next options are for geometry itself. And it has three options: branches and caps, leaves, front and meshes, and subdivision. And depending on your workflow, you might want your object to be triangulated or quad, depending on your needs. So let's go to script mode by using shortcut Control and 2 to be able to see the wireframe. So this is the wireframe of the tree, and you see everything in here has been triangulated. For example, if I go to branches and make it quad, it's going to calculate a bit and give you the quads back instead of triangulated mesh. And depending on your workflow, you might want to use triangles or quads. And the same goes for the leaves as well. For example, if I set the leaves to be quad as well, you see the leaves have been converted to triangulate to quads as well. And one thing for the branches to note is that the trunk itself has been considered a branch. And even the generator settings for the trunk and the branches are the same. And it's no wonder that if I set the branches to be quad, the trunk gets converted to quad as well. And the next setting is the shape, and this shape is going to, let me select this shape is going to affect the world generator disk for us. If I go into a new scene, it's this disk that you see here. If I increase the radius, it's going to make it larger or smaller. And if I increase the sync, you see it's going to make the world origin come down into here. You see, if this one is 0, for example, everything that I add into here is going to be spawned right into 000. But if I make the sync and bring it down into here, and if I delete this trunk, for example, if I add anything into here, for example an old trunk, it's going to start from here. And the same goes for this one, because this one has some roots and the creator has decided to make the pivot to be right in here. And this is going to be the pivot that we are going to export to any other software as well. And if I set this thing to be 0, you see everything comes up, and this is not so natural. And this is what is going to be spawned into other softwares as well. For example, if you have a couple of roots, you want to increase the sync a little bit just so that the roots go into the ground, and this is the ground in any application, and you might want to sync everything that has a little bit of root in there. And the next option is roll, and it's for rotating the tree based on the disk itself. Let me go for radius and make it 100, for example. And now you see, instead of the tree spawning in the center of the world, it's being spawned right in here. And if you export this to another application, the pivot point is going to be here and the tree in here. And the tree is going to be offsetted from the world origin. So on the roll, if I add another number, for example 10, it's going to roll into this circle and make it a spawn in another location. And of course, most of the times I really do not change these properties unless I have a strong reason to, because I want to export these into Unreal or anything else. I want them to spawn right into the center of the world so that the pivot is right and I do not have any problems rotating or scaling or anything. And let me show you the pivot example in here in Blender. You see the pivot is now right into the center of the world, and the cube that I have imported is having the pivot in the center. And whenever I want to rotate it, it's going to rotate alongside itself, and it's a lot more pleasing so that the pivot is contained into the object. But if I offset the pivot to the world origin, for example, just like the tree that we created in SpeedTree, let me make the pivot go to origin. You see now the pivot is in here, and if I want to manipulate this cube in here, I have to manipulate it from here. And if I want to rotate, it's going to rotate around the circle, and it's the circle that we had in the SpeedTree. So a lot of the times you want the pivot to be right in the center, or if it's a tree, you want it to be right in the bottom of the tree, so that manipulating and rotating and placing the tree inside the scene would be a lot easier, no matter it's in Blender, Unreal, or any DCC app that you have. So let's go for tree generator, and the next option is the subdivision. And for subdivision, let me go into here so that it has less subdivisions to work with and it's a little bit easier for me. So let me go render script mode, and you see the triangles in here. You see the mesh is fairly triangulated. So let's select the tree generator and make it quad first. So these were the most basic settings about the tree generator itself, the ones that you should know for starters. And other ones you will pick up as you go along deeper into a speed tree, and you really do not need to know them for now. And the next generator that we are going to explain is the branches. And the branches are going to be useful for trunks, branches, and even roots. You know, there are some modes like roots in these decorators. In here, if you select them, and if you bring any root into the scene or trunk or branch, it's going to be having the same settings as the branches that we add. So this is the default branch and it's always going to spawn a new thing, and these are some preset ones. For example, big, bifurcating, twigs, and many things. So let's spawn a default branch in here, and since this branch has been connected to the tree, it's not going to be what we want. We want to select this branch and connect it to the trunk so that the sizes and anything would be alright. And it's going to inherit a lot of the things from the generators previous to itself. So let's click on it to see the properties and explain them. Of course, these properties are going to be common between a lot of the things that we have in SpeedTree. And this generation panel is the most basic and most important throughout most of the generators in a SpeedTree. And if we use these settings right, we're going to have easier time setting up everything after. It's just like a choice that we make. And if we select this mode and know what this mode is, it's going to make it a lot easier on us to be able to make trees faster and more efficient. So, because this is going to take too long, we're going to explore these generation modes in the next lesson. Okay, take time, practice, and I'll see you in the next lesson.